Welcome, everybody. I'm Alfred Poor with Techfluence, and I welcome you here to hear the keynote address as part of the Techfluence program today. And it's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Baker of NPD. He offers expert insight and commentary to clients and the media about consumer technology sales and trends across the US and regionally. His perspectives cover retail and e-commerce, computer hardware and peripherals, holiday and yearly sales results, and analysis of new products and their impacts on the consumer technology market. He's been tracking and analyzing the technology industry for more than 30 years and has been quoted extensively in industry publications. And in fact, I imagine that many of you in the audience have quoted him from time to time, and I would say that if you haven't, you should be. So without any further ado, let me welcome Stephen Baker to the stage. Stephen?
Thanks a lot, Alfred. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today. We're going to talk a little bit today about the right place, the right product, the right time, and the go-to consumer technology products for the pandemic. Want to also just again thank Alfred and Barry and Ethan and the whole team for inviting us, and hope you guys all have a great show when the time is right. So this is me. I am been doing this, as Alfred said, for a long time, and hopefully we can provide you with some really great insights into what's going on. In case you're not familiar with NPD, NPD collects point of sale data from most of the major US and North American retailers, distributors, and resellers, both in stores and in e-commerce. We do receipt tracking, where we get receipts directly from consumers, and we also do survey work. So we have a very rounded view of the overall marketplace for consumer electronics here in the US. What are we going to talk about today? We'll give you a quick little market overview. We're going to talk about some of the most successful 2020 categories that actually have big volumes that maybe you might not be thinking about. We'll talk about some of the surprising 2020 success categories and some of the smaller volume categories. And then, because it's not any fun if you can't dump on somebody, we'll talk a little bit about some of the disappointing products and categories that happened here in 2020. So a little bit of an overview. Certainly, it's been a kind of an extraordinary year. What's driven consumer electronics sales in 2020? Certainly, it's the traditional volume leaders, TVs, PCs, tablets, but we couldn't get to the kind of numbers I'm showing you without a broad segment of the overall marketplace growing very strongly across the entire year. So it's not just TVs and it's not just PCs. And we'll see that in some of the data. I have said this for many years. Tech is not a discretionary purchase, but more than ever in 2020, it was a necessity. And because it was a necessity, people allocated their hard-earned money to that. Not only was it just a general necessity, but tech was in the right place at the right time, leveraging its strength in providing education, distance learning, work from home, entertainment technologies. Few other segments in all of consumer products have such broad appeal. And because of that, we are, I believe, as always, a mostly recessionary-proof business. We're looking forward to 2021 through 2023 for our next forecast. We believe we will continue to see strong volumes over the next 3 years, regardless of the economic conditions. And the necessity of buying technology really is all about driving a bigger business, and that bigger business is going to provide us benefits over the next few years as we sell into a larger installed base. The truism that tech is a product business and not really a customer business or a channel business was proven in 2020. We were successful because we had the right products at the right time. The best product, great product, the right product almost always wins, and technology is certainly leading the way in that. We'll talk a little bit in a second about channel. Certainly finding the right channels is always a challenge. It was a moving target in 2020, and it will accelerate over the next couple of years as these changes continue to move their way through the market. This looks at the overall sales for technology for 2020. You can see the start of the growth there in March, the peaks in July and August for back to school. Can see some of the widely reported numbers in November and December. We all know we had a relatively weak Thanksgiving week and a kind of a muted Cyber week, but all the weeks outside of that, for the most part during the holiday, were pretty strong. While we haven't finished all our accounting, we believe Q4 will be at about 14 or 15% revenue increase after a 25% increase in Q2 and Q3. That adds up to $14 billion in additional consumer technology revenue that NPD tracked this year. So certainly a historic year by any measure or any way of tracking. Like I said, we're a product business. So we wanted to look at some of the most important products that really drove the market this year on a kind of a macro level. On the left, we can see the top 10 product categories led by, in order from Q4, led by VR, obviously in Q4 with that strong Oculus launch. But then you can see a lot of categories in here around productivity and compute that really do track to what I had talked about earlier about education from home, distance learning, work from home, being the real catalysts for growth this year. Categories like routers and components that we'll talk about in a minute. On the right, we can see all the big categories, the $6 billion a quarter categories. And I think what I really want to hammer home here is that in Q4, in general, everything started to slow down. We could not keep up that kind of a pace over the first that we saw in Q2 and Q3. And those challenges in Q4, while they were strong, still allowed us to grow at 13 or 14%. But instead of those big categories exceeding the overall marketplace growth in Q4 in total, TVs, PCs, tablets, ink for your printer, those kind of categories basically tracked alongside the marketplace. So that's something to think about as we go back into the next couple of years and talk about what the challenges will be. How much can those big categories continue to drive the overall marketplace? Speaking of the overall marketplace, tech is probably, in terms of consumer products, the most highly online penetrated category. In Q2, NPD's checkout data, which is that receipt harvesting product I talked about earlier, tracked 2/3 of all revenue coming from online transactions. And online transactions also includes buy online, pick up in store. But you can see, even before that, that sales online were trending higher. And typically in every quarter, we were seeing about a 2 to 4 point increase from the quarter the year before. And in Q4 and then again in Q1, we saw the sales volumes tick over 50%. The last three periods, we've been at 68, 58, 61%. We believe that tech will stay at those kind of levels. As many others have said, we certainly moved this needle ahead by maybe 2 years, maybe longer, there's really no putting that genie back in the bottle. Consumers are going to buy considerably more products online than they have in the past. Where are they going to be buying those products is really important. So a couple of things that we have seen during the pandemic period that are really interesting. First is that retailers did a very good job in Q2 and Q3 of transferring sales out of their stores and into online. A big percentage of that was delivery, but we've certainly seen very large quantities of products being picked up curbside or at the store. But the challenge has been that even when you add up the continued in-store sales alongside the revenue that we see coming from online sales, retailers have been losing share throughout the pandemic. Where are they losing share to? Well, some of it is to online only retailers, but a bigger chunk of it is to direct. And while we all are very familiar with direct in tech, we have seen a lot of that move into a new level as people go online. Increasingly, they're more likely to look around and see where they can buy things, and oftentimes they will go to the manufacturer. This is a total consumer industry trend. In many of the other categories that NPD tracks, we are seeing these same kind of things happen, where that direct-to-consumer marketplace is really, in many industries, the catalyst or one of the biggest catalysts for growth. And it certainly has jumped to the forefront again in the technology business. So that's a bit of an overview of some of what I think are the most core things to be thinking about from a top-line perspective for 2020. So let's start to talk about some of the winners for the pandemic. These products were focused on productivity, but they did support that growing demand for entertainment as well. So these 5 categories, the DIY components, products like processors, motherboards, empty desktop cases. Building a PC became something that people did as a hobby, but also became a secondary leverage point for consumers and for the businesses and for gaming during the pandemic. Monitors alongside networking were the 2 most consistently high growing categories throughout the entire pandemic. Both of them grew 50, 60, 70% or more. Monitors clearly have a huge impact in the work from home and the distance learning environment, and they also benefit from gaming. But let's look at also, we'll talk about gaming, not just gaming monitors, but gaming computers, gaming mice, keyboards, and peripherals. While we talk a lot about streaming as being kind of the new content for consumers to use when they're home, I really do think that PC gaming, with obviously the huge increase that we've seen in console gaming as well, was really the big winner during the pandemic. And all the gaming accessories, gaming-related categories and brands had very successful 2020s. PC headsets. Now, some of those headsets are gaming, but as we're all sitting in front of our computers here, as we're all still at home, the growth in non-gaming PC headsets was nothing short of remarkable. And it was not just a retail environment. We saw huge increases in the B2B markets as well, as businesses started to push those kind of products out to their employees as well. And then networking, which I mentioned, infrastructure is sexy again. We had been able to ignore our routers for a long time, but I think those days are over, and we need to give a little bit of love to our routers going forward. So let's talk about DIY. This was a record record-breaking year for the DIY market. We tracked about 1.1 billion in revenue in Q4, and yes, some of that was generated by the growth of the new graphics cards and some of the new processors. But as you can see, we grew very strongly in every single quarter in Q2 and in Q3, way before those products came to market. Typically, over the last 7 years, NPD has tracked a little less than 1 million empty cases, which is a great proxy for new PC builds, most of which are gaming. This year, we're going to track 1.7 million empty cases. And again, almost all of those, or a vast majority of those, are going to go to be gaming desktops. So a very, very impressive season for the whole DIY category. I mentioned PC monitors being one of the most consistent growth categories, but honestly, it was already starting to grow in the back half of 2019. We had seen double-digit growth, but 2020 took that to a new level, 50, and as I said, 60, 70, 80% growth. Some of the core products that drove that were standard monitors in the 24-inch size. And in gaming, the number 2 product type was 27-inch gaming monitors at a $276 price point. I would point out that in both of the same price bands that are screen bands that we see here, the 23.8 and 27, gaming generates a significant average selling price premium to the overall market for the product. And we see that time and time again. And one of the drivers and one of the interests for every single retailer and brand going forward is going to be to deliver more gaming type products, because gaming demands a premium and brings a premium price point from the consumer. Total CE hardware gaming revenue was up $1 billion this year. In 2019, it was a little less than $3 billion, and this year, preliminarily, or 2020, I guess, since we're not in 2020 anymore, was $3.7 billion. Again, category had been growing, but we saw that growth go to a whole new level. Some of the sidebars here, gaming mice and keyboards were up 50% versus 2019. Non-gaming mice and keyboards were up about 25%. As I mentioned, gaming peripherals generate great ASPs, and we actually saw ASPs go up in gaming peripherals, both in keyboards and in mice. So there's a huge opportunity here in these categories. Some of the best selling ones of those in gaming keyboards, the Corsair K55 was the #1 SKU in NPD's data in 2020, followed by 3 Razer SKUs and a HyperX SKU. And I'll point out that the #3 Razer SKU sold at a much higher premium to the overall marketplace. And typically, top SKUs on a unit basis are not the highest price points, whereas we see that here. We also see it in gaming mice, where a number of those mice were also among the highest price point products in that category. And again, we see how important branding is, especially from a brand like Razer, which had 3 of the top 5 gaming keyboards, 3 of the top 5 gaming mice, and 2 of the top 5 gaming headsets. So those are really, really strong products. And again, I think what you see here is that there is certainly an opportunity for a mix of products. Gamers don't just buy the most expensive product, but they do drive a huge amount of volume. I mentioned non-gaming headsets. The total market in the last 9 months for non-gaming headsets doubled That is an increase from 4 million units in 2019 to 8 million units in 2020. And including all of NPD's B2B tracking as well, these are the top 5 non-gaming PC headsets, representing a substantial portion of that marketplace. Some of them at relatively low prices, but a couple of them at over 30, and the Plantronics product obviously at over $60 average selling price. This is one of the most interesting pieces. Again, we don't want to get ourselves just focused on gaming. We want to think about the productivity opportunities that we're also seeing in the broad use cases that we see throughout these kind of products. Networking was our 5th best category here. You can see that every type of product in home networking, adapters, modems, gateways, access points, extenders, routers, all of them showed substantial double-digit unit volume increases over 2019 and 2020. And if we had shown you these 2018 numbers, almost all of them would have been flat. There was a huge recognition of the value of infrastructure. And almost every single brand that plays in the network category saw significant double-digit growth, led by TP-Link, which grew by over 150%. And again, that's across all these different categories. So again, another segment with huge increases and a huge value proposition to the consumer. So let's talk about 3 surprising growth stories. All of these categories generate less than $100 million in revenue during 2020, so we would consider those relatively small categories. Digital picture frames, which, if we go back 10 years, was a big star. It came back again. It's been coming back. And 2020 will likely, when we look back on it, be the culmination of a long comeback in the value of that product. But we've certainly seen better sales results for a number of years in that. Cleaning accessories, dust, wipes, wash your hands, clean your keyboard is really a mantra for 2020, and cleaning accessories leverage that. And the other one, which I found probably the most interesting of everything here, networking cables. We all talk about going wireless, but I got to tell you, the best idea I ever had was plugging in a network cable from my mesh satellite into my notebook. I got way better speeds and much more stability. I do it with my televisions. The world needs wires. And we definitely saw people recognize that and buy cabling in very large numbers. You could see here over the last 4 or 5 years, the average selling price on these digital picture frames has gone up substantially by about 50% as they become more connected. And the revenue growth, which frankly was relatively low in 2016 and 2017, started to trend up in 2018, in 2019, and in 2020, there were quarters where we saw 60% revenue growth in this category. Cleaning accessories, again, we saw almost $90 million in revenue in 2020, which is going to be the highest revenue we've ever seen, with about 10 million units of sales. You can see some of the best sellers there: screen wipes and compressed gas to clean off those keyboards and make those screens nice and smudge free. This category probably has legs as we get into 2020 and 2021. 2021, I guess. We're in 2020. Network cables posted the highest revenue that they've ever had, higher than all the way back into 2013. We talked about how important a cable is to the right kind of at-home environment. So let's talk about 3 underperforming categories. Smart home. We're home all the time. Do we really need security? How much security do we need? Is that really a priority? It was clearly a lower priority in 2020. We expect it to continue to maintain its growth, but in 2020, it grew less than the market, even though in the previous few years it had been growing faster. We expect growth to continue apace, but we certainly didn't see the kind of spikes in smart home that we saw in a lot of other categories in 2020. Headphones, we lost some headphone volume to headsets, but lack of personal mobility, lack of exercising in home, or not away, but in home exercising, the slow phone sales, and some saturation in Apple clearly caused some underperformance in the headphones market. And again, we're never far from a plug anymore, and wireless power, which we had touted a couple of years ago as being a huge opportunity going forward, suffered from the slow phone sales, also falling prices, and the lack of mobility that we saw in 2020. You can see here that while on a quarterly basis in 2019, smart home was growing much faster than the overall market. In the last 3 quarters, and certainly Q2 and Q3, smart home grew much slower than the overall business. And in Q4, it grew at about the same. And most of that is the cause of security cameras, which are about 50% of industry revenue. And they had a much more muted 2020 than we've seen in previous years. Headphones had their huge explosions in 2018, 2019, AirPods Pro, but we continued to see declines in the entry-level unit volumes as people switch maybe from wireless to wired. We see some saturation. And as I mentioned, without the lack of mobility, clearly hurt the headphone market in 2020. You can see that decline in share on entry-level headphones, those under $50 ones. As important, again, as AirPods and higher-end products are, they don't nearly represent the same kind of volume that entry-level headphone does. Wireless power, on the other hand, did start to peak a little bit here in the end of 2020 during the holiday. MagSafe release really did help that. But as you can see, we've been seeing average selling prices go down, revenue go down over the last couple of years. And while you would think that we would continue to see this growth in all sorts of different types of power, we definitely didn't see that happening here in 2010. While you would think that's where we are this year. I want to thank you all for coming. If you want a little bit more information, if you want to see some more details on our holiday review or our forecast for 2021 and beyond, you can come to our content portal that we're doing as part of our virtual CES. Here's the link. We'll be doing our forecast review on Friday, our holiday review on Monday. So with that, I want to thank you. If you have any questions, you can email me, you can email Megan, you can let the Techfluence guys know. We're happy to answer any questions to the extent we can. And let me turn it back over to Alfred.
Okay. Thank you, sir, so much, Steve. Just one quick question before we go to the panel. We did have a question asking whether you had any numbers about webcams as a category, since work from home has been a big issue.
Yeah. So we didn't put it in there because we were kind of looking for things that people might not expect that did very well. webcams were up 4 or 5 times where they were in 2019. But I'll give you one surprising piece of this, which is we're thinking of webcams for ourselves, but actually we have seen much higher growth in commercial markets than in consumer markets for webcams. Hospitals, schools, all those areas have really, as soon as webcams kind of came back in stock, those were really the first places that got their inventory fulfilled. And once those products came back in stock, again, we've seen 4 or 5x the volumes that we had seen in previous years when the category was relatively moribund in terms of demand. Certainly going forward, the webcam is going to be a much more important part of our home and work consumer electronics arsenal than it was in previous times.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm about to turn this over to Ethan for the panel discussion. I'll just mention before I go, if you want, we won't be using slides in the panel discussion, so you can minimize that screen if you want. You can also enlarge or maximize the video screen so you can see everybody. And with that, I will duck out and turn it over to Ethan. Let me get everybody unmuted. And there we go.
Thanks, Alfred. Hi, everybody. Stephen, thanks for that great presentation. That was fascinating. And I think I'm not the only one who's going to be going back to the archive to listen to that later and look back on some of the insights that you shared. I'm really excited about all of this. My name's Ethan Raziel, and I head up Lightspeed PR. I'll briefly introduce myself, but then I'll turn it over to my panelists here. My company is handling the media outreach and reservations for this event. I've been working with Barry Myers, who's the producer of this, for many years. We've done many events together, going all the way back to Get Geeked and Gadget Live and CE Week and Digital Life. But today is the one I'm most excited about because we're seeing really this new format take off. I just want to share the numbers with you. We have more than 600 journalists that have RSVP'd to be here. I know that more than 200 people are here in the room who just have been watching Stephen speak. The great thing about this is that we've removed the geographic limitations. So in the past, we've done events, and we've done the New York event, the San Francisco event, and now anybody from all over the world can come join us. So there are some real positives to what we've been forced to do it this way, but there are real positives, and that's what the theme of this event is. We're going to talk with our panelists. We have Lauren Dragon, who's senior staff writer at the New York Times Wirecutter. Stephen Baker, who I don't think needs further introduction, but you just heard from him. He's the Vice President of Industry Analysis at NPD Group. And Michael Arst, who's the COO at Atari, VCS and Connected Devices. So welcome all of you. I want to just quickly ask if you could all just tell me, would you normally be getting ready to go to Las Vegas right now if we weren't here virtually? Lauren, you'd be going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have for many years now. I've been a regular CES attendee, so I would 100% be in Vegas right now. Yeah,
Michael, you'd be in Vegas. I don't see you. Can you hear me? Okay. Oh, Michael had a technical issue. He's coming back in a minute. So let's use this time to complete the intros. I gave you my intro. Lauren, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Lauren Dragon, senior staff writer, like Ethan said. I work right now with New York Times Wirecutter, but in the past, I've worked for other home audio, home theater magazines for a number of years. I have a background primarily in high-end audio and AV type products, but I've covered a lot of different other things since coming to Wirecutter. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here.
Great. Excited to have you with us. Michael, are you back on? I saw him for a second, so I know he's around.
Yeah.
Oh, I see you. Hi, Michael.
Okay. I don't see me in the audience view, but I see you guys.
You're there. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. Michael, again, is the COO with Atari. Lauren and myself have done our intros. And could you just introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Yeah, sure. Very quickly. So yes, Michael Arst. I am, like you said, COO of Atari VCS and connected devices. So heading up the hardware division at the new reconstituted, reimagined, re-energized Atari.
Well, we're excited to have you with us. And then, Stephen, for those who didn't hear your intro in your session, could you introduce yourself for everybody?
Sure. I'm the Vice President Industry Analyst for Technology at NPD. I've been here for more than 20 years. Prior to that, I was actually an original employee at Staples. So I worked for Staples the day the first store opened, May 1st, 1986.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. Okay, so I want to get into some questions. I do want to remind you that if you're looking at tiny postage stamps, you can maximize that video and that window, and you can see us. Also, there's a slide window, which you can go ahead and minimize because we're not doing slides. That was for leftover from Stephen's presentation. And the last bit of housekeeping I want to say is that you can ask questions. And we will we'll hit them as they come in. I saw one question about the background music. That might be from another tab, so close your other tabs if you're hearing background music. Okay, so first question. I want to give this one to Michael. I'm a gamer, so I'm really excited to hear a little bit about the Atari console. I mean, you just launched a new console during a global pandemic. So from a marketing standpoint, what challenges did you have and how did you overcome it?
Well, I don't think it'll be a shock if I say I don't recommend it. It's been kind of a crazy path, and certainly 2020 was interesting. So, you know, as you said earlier in the call, we all would have been at CES or on our way to CES. Certainly that was, you know, we've kind of come full circle because we left CES last year. We went, you know, we were there for a week, then we went to China for 10 days, and we were there right up until Chinese New Year. And basically left there. Actually, our factory friends were trying to get us to stay and celebrate with them at least for a couple of extra days. And we were like, no, we've been in Vegas, we've been here, it's time to go home, and we'll see you in a month. Lo and behold, then the lockdowns all started happening. Chinese New Year got extended by a week in some places, by much more than that in other places, and everything was, you know, pretty, you know, just screwed up, for lack of a better term. Sorry to use technical terms. So yeah, so we actually very much had to pivot. So we did come back from China, and while it was over Chinese New Year, we actually did what was supposed to be the first of a year-long roadshow with consumers and press and everybody. So we went to a small event that was supposed to be kind of a dress rehearsal in New York, something called the D Cave, which was a hands-on gaming event. We worked with the guys at Rect Global for that, and it was a great success. We put the VCS in consumers' hands for the first time. Obviously, you know, early days, you know, pre-production hardware, definitely pre-production software. But it was supposed to be the first of many. And from there, we were going to go to South by Southwest. We were going to go to E3. We were going to go to San Diego Comic-Con. We were going to go to the PAXs. We were going to go to et cetera, et cetera. So all those events would have been phenomenal opportunities for us to be hands-on with consumers and get that direct feedback right then and there. And, you know, we lost out on all of that. And, you know, now, so yes, we're in sort of what I would call a soft beta launch right now. We launched the VCS into the hands of our original early adopter Indiegogo backers that first backed this device back in 2018. And so there's about 12,000 or so of them. not all of them actually got the machines, if you can believe that. There's about 9,000 of them, 9,500 of them who are getting the machines. And right now there's several thousand that are still remaining, because COVID is the gift that keeps on giving. All the UPS, FedEx, USPS, global shipping, DHL, all that is all completely screwed up. Everything's taking 1,000 times longer than it should, or it seems to be. So a lot of very impatient folks, but the people who are getting it are loving it, and they're helping us. We've set up a Discord. We've got a lot of community channels. We're debugging. We're logging things. There's some known issues that are coming up that'll be updated pretty soon in a firmware update. But yeah, I mean, this is very much a beta period, and these Indiegogo backers, we told them from the start that they'd be helping us bring this thing successfully to market, and they certainly are, because, like I said, we lost a full year of, hands-on that we would have had through many other venues. So it's certainly been a challenge from a standpoint of launching hardware that is obviously very software dependent and very feedback dependent. But it's been great. I mean, we're very excited about the feedback that we are getting, because the vast majority of it is very positive, and the bugs and things and the wrinkles that we need to iron out are all seemingly going to be manageable.
Great. Michael asked a question that came from one of the audience members, and that is, what do you think is more important, traditional media or influencer coverage like YouTube? So
I think for us, I think it's a big part of it. I mean, we're unique because Atari is, so this Atari is in a lot of ways, we're like a little scrappy little startup with a really, really big brand, right? That gets, immediate notice. So on the one hand, we've got a very core, what we call our classic audience, folks who've been with the brand for 40, 50 years. They're generally 35 plus and know us one way. And, a lot of them still have, the old 2600 and and cartridges piled up, et cetera, et cetera. But we're also trying to appeal to a newer audience. I often equate this product to being like a modern day Mini Cooper, right? Where it's, who drives those? Old guys and young people. And, and we need to get to both of them, right? So the answer to that is all of the above. But I think, for us to appeal to the newer generations and the newer audiences, clearly, influencers and YouTube and all of that, and Instagram and et cetera, that's all the new currency for sure. And obviously that plays well into, a product that has a major digital component, and obviously plays well into, a brand like ours that is, while it's very much a hardcore gaming brand, it's also very much a lifestyle brand at this point. We've kind of, we're fortunate being Atari that we're one of the gaming brands that has been able to transcend gaming, and we're very much a pop culture brand. When I'm on the Zoom later in the booth, I'll have the Blade Runner art behind me. I can't use that here, but we end up in all kinds of pockets of pop culture, music, videos, movies. I think we're in Wonder Woman somewhere right now, and Stranger Things, et cetera, et cetera. So, we get the benefit of familiarity, but by the same token, we can't rest on that. We have to rely on getting the word out, and obviously with a product that is, so community driven and so important to so many people because of our brands. It's very important that we have, organic and authentic communication about the product and about its attributes, and like I said, so far so good. Everybody seems to really love it, and for the, like I said, the few wrinkles that we have to iron out, we're getting a mulligan for sure from our backers, because they expected that, right? So, but obviously expectations only go so far, and our job is to make sure that we are continually improving the platform and improving the experience, adding more games, adding more apps, adding more functionality. But yeah, we're off to a good start. We're pleased.
All right. Well, congrats on that. Let's go to Lauren, and thank you again, Lauren, for being with us. Lauren, of course, is with the Wirecutter, which is part of the New York Times, and people like me love reading it. And Lauren, I know you're reviewing headphones. I see you run a story almost every day. My question for you is, how has your job changed now that, we talked about at the beginning, you're not going to CES, you're not going to trade shows, you're doing more virtual events like this. How has that changed your approach to doing what you do? And for PR people like me, any advice for how we can best work with you?
Well, one thing that hasn't changed about my approach is that I like hands-on with the product itself. And so it does mean that, I now, instead of being able to go to one location and walk from booth to booth and pick stuff up and play with it, I have stuff at home. But I'll tell you, honestly, that was something I used to do before anyway. While it's nice to get that little sort of initial hands-on with something at a booth, it's usually not a full representation of what the consumer experience is like. And for me as a reviewer, that's my biggest priority, is to see what it's like when someone buys the thing, gets it home, sets it up, pairs it to their phone. How does everything work for them? How are the touch controls? And sometimes if it's, not necessarily, if it's a noise canceling, then it's a good chance to try that out in a busy, conference hall like South Hall would be before. But it's something that if it's like a high-end audio product where you really want to sit and listen and there's fine details, you really can't do that in the middle of a booth. So it's, for me, I've always really most enjoyed the time talking to the people who develop the products. And so that's something that I'm really missing in this time of not going to CES. I used to get to kind of get those little sidebars of the engineers and find out sort of what they're working on, what they're trying to do next, what their intention was, and get that sort of back and forth dialogue. And that's the biggest thing that I'm missing right now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can start to fill the gap a little bit with things like this, but I have a feeling we might never get all the way back to South Hall. I'm not sure if South Hall is happening in my future. Okay. I want to just mention that there's a lot of questions coming in about Atari. I'm not going to be able to get to all of the technical questions, but I would encourage all of you, Stuart and Neil and John, in about 15 minutes, the show floor is going to open, and you can head over there and you can talk to Michael there, and you can ask all those questions that we don't get to here. I want to ask a question for Stephen. Stephen, you the trends, the macro trends, what's succeeding, what isn't. I want to ask a question more you personally, and how your job has been affected in the COVID era. Is there any benefits, or is it all down?
You know what? There's good and bad, right? I was traveling 40, 45 weeks a year before this, so I do miss that. It's been harder, obviously, on my wife because now I'm home all the time, and that's certainly not good for her. But the benefit, I will tell you, and you sort of mentioned it about being able to get so many more people together in one space, we can do a lot more meetings. We can connect a lot more because everybody isn't all flying all over the place or in different areas. So as a company, we at NPD have found that we can get better meetings. We can have more people attend. We can have, higher level people attend because they're less mobile than they were before. So it's a little easier to do that. And, if you want to have a meeting at Microsoft in the morning and Google in the afternoon, when you've got to fly between the two of them, that's not so easy. When it's just, Zoom or Meet or something, you can do a lot more of those. So the bottom line is, I miss traveling. I'm working probably 50% more than I was before. But, we definitely feel like we're getting a lot more out of our ability to connect with our partners, our clients, and the industry in general.
Yep, that's a great answer. I want to share a comment that's come in from my friend Avram Pilch from Tom's Hardware, and he points out that what's really lacking from the old school traditional trade shows is seeing things that you aren't supposed to see, things in the corner of the booth, or unreleased stuff that maybe shouldn't have been on display but was still there. I want to ask each of you, starting with Lauren, did you ever have that experience of finding things you weren't supposed to find at trade shows?
All the time. And that's sort of the undercurrent of my talking with the engineers, because one thing I've found is that, and this may be a generalization, but a lot of times engineers don't get to talk to people who understand what it is that they're doing. They tend to have to land down the tech. And when someone actually understands the technology, they get so excited and want to tell you things that there's a lot of times that I get to have all right, off the record, let me tell you this thing we're working on. And look, I absolutely will. If somebody tells me something's under embargo, I will 100% keep that to myself. But it does give us a chance to understand where, things are going, where companies are looking, where they're investing their money and time. And that also helps us to kind of keep an eye on consumer trends too. So for me, it helps me plan when I get to see sort of what people are working on in the back room. And I have absolutely bebopped into rooms where they open one door to have a meeting and they're like, oh, you're not supposed to go in there. Hold on a second. And I'm like, but what was that? So I am someone who always asks questions and wants to poke at the little red button to find out what it does. So I love those moments. It's my favorite stuff about these types of meetings.
Well, maybe we need to find a way to bring that. Michael, I want to ask you about that. You've got a booth that you're getting ready to launch here, Techfluence, in a few minutes. Is there any chance that people might see any stuff they're not supposed to see, maybe in the corner if they look carefully?
In this booth? No, I think we're okay. Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what I think what Lauren was saying is right. I mean, a lot of, we've got team members who are really excited about what we're doing. So I think, there's going to be some good engagement. And, I saw some of the questions that came up that you kindly told people to ask in the booth later. So yeah, there's some things that, and then, look, there's always, as Lauren also was alluding, there's always, probably some answers that aren't supposed to get out, but like I know a lot of answers, right? But I don't necessarily know if I'm supposed to give them yet.
Yeah.
I mean, because there's so much coming with this console. I mean, we're in such early days. I mean, this guy is like in the incubator, right? It's hasn't come out and taken its first real steps yet, let alone spread its wings and tried to fly. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff that I think is going to make a lot of people really interested and happy. I mean, we're kind of, we've labeled the machine as a PC console hybrid, and we don't really want to be compared to like the other retro machines. We certainly don't want to be compared to the big corporate machines like PlayStation and Xbox, because we're not either of those things. Nor do we want to be compared to like a $5,000 gaming rig. But at the same time, we're trying to create kind of a category for ourselves that's unique, much like, the original Atari VCS did, 40 something years ago. So we're walking a fine line. But yeah, I mean, to come back to your original question, yeah, there's certainly some things in the corners of our dusty brains for sure. So we'll see if they come out in the booth later.
Ryan Downey is wondering if the printer behind you is anything top secret, but I'm guessing maybe not so much.
No, that is, no offense to HP, that is an old junky thing that I keep around merely because it's the only way I could send a fax, because every once in a while somebody needs one. It's bizarre, but yeah, when you make those medical claims, it infuriates me when Stigma can't take a PDF. Give me a break, guys.
Yeah, right.
2021.
I want to go back to Stephen for a second. There's some fascinating questions that are rolling in here, and a lot of people are asking about trust and relationships, and when we're moving into this virtual world and we're not shaking hands and we're not going out for drinks later like we were in Las Vegas. Stephen, let me ask you this question, and maybe the others too, but how do we replace that ability to build trust and relationships when we're on Zoom?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure I got a great answer for you. You know, I'm an old man. I like those personal relationships on a face-to-face basis. It's hard to do that, and one of the reasons I'm looking forward to getting out, even if it's certainly not likely to be as much as it used to be, is to be able to develop those kind of relationships. This is all great. We can connect, but you know, at some level, it is kind of impersonal, and I do think that, especially for my job, the power of your personality and the enthusiasm and interest that you have in things comes through and gets people to want to talk to you, have a relationship with you, and have some of those kind of sidebar conversations that we were talking about.
Yep. Well, let me just offer this insight. From my standpoint as the head of a PR firm, and I've got clients all over the place, and one shift that's really happened for me is what used to be phone calls, we're now doing video calls. And even when we never were in the same city and we weren't going to meet anyway, but everything's now video. And I have found that to have been a great improvement in our calls where we can see each other. And the pandemic has kind of accelerated that. So I want to ask all of you, and I want to start with Lauren, if you have found that in this kind of new normal, if there have been any benefits that you've achieved or that you've observed versus the old way.
Well, you know, it's funny one thing I will say is I personally haven't had, other than the trade show aspect, my overall day-to-day life hasn't changed a whole lot. Wirecutter's always been a remote company. We've always been a remote-friendly company, and I've been with Wirecutter now for, 7 years and some. So, and prior to that, I was freelance writing for a bunch of different publications. So one of the key things is that you have to learn how to communicate with your team, and also how to learn the communication styles of each individual person. And I'll say from a journalistic side, working with someone who is, working with PR folks, the best PR folks learn the style of the journalist that they're working with. Some people really like those face-to-face conversations. Some people, if you call their phone, they want to scream and run and hide. Some people just want emails and press releases. Some people want to, so learning kind of what it is that folks want to know really makes a big difference to us so that we can get the information in the way that best helps our style of journalism. Because some people are very news-based. I'm not. I am review-based. And so I want the product and the specs and the details. I don't care so much as about the, partnerships and new colorways and things like that. So I think that the biggest thing that I've really found is important is even in interpersonal working, just with my own team, is learning how my editors want the information from me and how they communicate, and sort of adapting my style to each individual person. And the same thing with PR. There's some folks that I have to poke at and say, hey, anything new? And there's some folks that they will tell me stuff the minute there's a whisper of a thought about a new product. So you kind of, it's really taught that skill of, intuition, empathy, and really learning about other people. And I think that's one thing that's been really good about this, is sort of getting to know folks individually beyond just what they're like at a trade show or what they're like, as a corporate front.
Yep. That's a great perspective. Michael, I want to ask you something similar. And this is, it's a weird way of saying it, but what's been your favorite part of this global pandemic?
It's, it's been a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, we all have that love-hate relationship with travel, right? I should have been in China 8-10 times this year, and I was there once, right? So,
what are you, patient zero?
So, when we have more time, I have some interesting stories about that last trip to China, but and the weeks right after it, because we have products coming out of we have the game system itself. The main system comes out of one part of China. The controllers and joysticks come out of another part of China, and the way different parts of China were going down back then, especially in the early days, was pretty interesting. And to be honest, so much of that has not even changed. There's still supply chain issues. The dollar to the exchange rate is terrible. So cost of goods is going up instead of down. So even though you're getting the economies of scale with volume increasing, it's being offset by these other things and missing deadlines and all that. So it's frustrating, but yeah. So like I said, definitely. So like I said, that double-edged sword of the travel thing has been, what I would say is the biggest. But yeah, it's we're figuring out a way, and hopefully, there's a light at the end of the tunnel in the next few months as things change.
Yes, I sure hope so. We're going to wind it down in just a minute, but I want to ask Stephen to answer this last question. What's been any pros, any things that you've really appreciated coming out of this experience over the last 9 months?
Like I said, I think we've gotten opportunities to talk to people that we wouldn't have had otherwise, because everybody was not moving around, and it was just easier to make those schedules happen than it wasn't. So that was a big benefit. Despite how much harder I've had to work, it's also been very fun to be able to look every week at the sales numbers and see 20 and 30 and 40 and 50% sales increases every week, which has been very exciting. After doing this for a long time, you get kind of jaded with all those 2 and 3% kind of activities. And there's a lot more things to talk about now. So those kind of things, I think, have been a benefit. Whether it offsets all the pain and misery that so many people have endured, it certainly doesn't. But
No,
from a
I don't
work
think so.
perspective, it's been, it hasn't been the worst year of work I've ever had.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for that answer, and thank you all for joining me on this panel. Thank you, Lauren Dragon, Stephen Baker, Michael Arst. Thanks to all of you who joined. I wanted to just give my email address. If we didn't get any questions answered that you want answered, you can email me. My email address is ethan@lightbpr.com. Oh, yeah, there it is. Sorry. I'm going to get
Stop now.
We'll talk later. I'm going to get my hands on that. Make sure to go visit the Atari booth, and you can talk to Michael, and you can ask all the questions we didn't get to. Make sure to read Wirecutter, and you can read all of the great articles that Lauren is doing. And, of course, Stephen can be found at NPD. My email address is ethan@lightspeedpr.com. Go check out the show floor. We have 20 exhibits. Last you visit the different booths on the show floor and go back to the show floor, close the tabs of the booths you just left. Otherwise, they're all going to stay open in the background, and you're going to end up with 12 different audio streams, and nobody wants to have that. So enjoy the show floor. Thank you so much for being with us, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.